Hello, bonjour et bienvenue. My name is Catherine Lapresse, and you're listening to Feuilles Friandises, the show with tasty treats and even tastier questions. Today we are joined by Elisabeth Biget-Lebrun in her home in Rue Saint-Lazare, the year 1837. She's known for being a highly successful woman painter, beginning in the late 18th century, and for escaping the French Revolution as a consequence of her associations with the Ancien Régime. We'll be revisiting the key destinations of her journey, most of which are mentioned in her recently published Souvenir Volume 2, a companion to her successful letters in Volume 1, published in the past 2 years. Welcome to the show, Madame Biget-Lebrun.
Merci. Call me Elisabeth, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you for having me in your beautiful home, Elisabeth. You were born here in Paris, 1775, correct?
Oui, April 16. And I do intend to pass here as well. Paris has always been my true home. I'm very fortunate to be able to live out my final years in this beautiful city.
I imagine it is very different than it was 80 years ago. Tell us, what was France like when you were a child?
Well, pre-revolutionary France had an entirely different political climate. King Louis XV was reigning at the time of my birth. Economic classes were extremely divided, though my family sat relatively comfortable due to my father's income as a portraitist.
Right, your father was an artist too. Did his work in pastels inspire you to pursue what would eventually become your lifelong career?
Absolutely. My father was a talented man. Seeing him draw and paint for years inspired me to pick up a pencil and begin sketching. I incessantly doodled in the convent, on my papers, yes, but even the walls. After I refined my skills more, there was no going back. I knew I would be painting for as long as I could. The connections I had through my father definitely helped me begin my career as a portraitist early on. However, he passed when I was only a teenager, so he was never able to see the successful woman I would grow into.
How unfortunate. If I recall correctly, your mother remarried?
She did, but I did not care much for the man. Once I began earning a steady income, my stepfather seemed inclined on receiving constant payments from me.
You provided for the family financially, and at such a young age. What was your relationship like with your mother?
She was a strict and pious woman, who clearly favored my brother. Still, she was a good mother. She was encouraging and even sat for earlier paintings to help my studying. I remember when Papa died, I was inconsolable. To help with the grief, Mama frequently took me to the galleries at the Luxembourg Palace.
I imagine those visits were a great help in your education. How did your mother influence your own motherhood?
I certainly inherited her piety. I suppose I was also strict in some ways, but my dear Julie was so hard-headed. Mon Dieu, she made life difficult. How I miss her, though.
You've lost a lot of people.
The joys of getting old. I do regret that I outlived Ma Brunette.
Such a sweet nickname. What of her father?
Monsieur Lebrun and I married in 1776. Our careers meshed well together, as he was an arts dealer. We had Julie a few years later, in February of 1780.
And you mentioned your brother. What was your relationship like with him?
His name was Etienne. He was a poet and a playwright, although we did disagree politically, but otherwise he was still my brother and I miss him dearly.
Well, your love is clear in the portraits you painted of him. I'd love to ask you more about your family in a bit, but first I'd like to revisit the night you left France. To start us off, let us enjoy a treat from the country that first took you in, Italy. Voilà la sfogliatella.
Merci.
At least you. Though I imagine it doesn't reflect on the night you fled for Rome. Can you walk us through the events leading up to and including that night?
Yes, of course. It was October 5th, 1789. Tensions had been rising for some time. The streets were violent, and I was afraid to leave my home. And even then, home became unsafe. Miscreants threw sulfur into our cellars through the gratings. If I stood at the window, brutal sans-culottes shook their fists at me. I did fall into depression.
What prompted you to finally leave?
I was very decided by then. It was just a matter of housekeeping. I readied my daughter and her governess to leave, when I was accosted and threatened in my home by the Garde Nationale. After they left, 2 of them returned and implored me to leave immediately, and more discreetly than I had originally planned.
Which you did. In a stagecoach while dressed as in proletaire?
Oui. I took but little linen with me, and only 80 louis for my journey. And just in time, their highnesses were taken to Paris by an angry mob that same morning.
Must have been frightening.
It was the most dreadful time of my life. On the road to Rome, there were terrible rumors of the fate of Les Bourbons and of the city. And my poor Julie was devastated. She believed her father was killed and her house burnt down. Journey aside, I couldn't shake the feeling that all of my achievements were for naught.
It must be noted, though, you thrived outside of France, especially as a woman. You were not afforded the same opportunities as your male counterparts, who had all studied the arts abroad. Rome not only offered you refuge, it gave you education.
C'est vrai. I once had the privilege of accompanying my husband on a business trip to Flanders, where I viewed many paintings by Rubens, and I craved more of that type of learning. Traveling to Rome in particular was something I'd always wished to do. While there, I visited museums, galleries, and even theaters.
In those days, you were well liked at court. You were a successful salonière. Your work ethic aside, those connections helped establish you outside of France.
Oui. I was well received by the Italians. I found company with other French émigrés and people of stature from whom I took many a commission. But it was a bittersweet pill to swallow. Had I not thought of my poor France, I should then have been a most happy woman.
You gained much, but at the cost of dear friends.
Oui.
Let us pay tribute to them with this apfel strudel from your Majesty's homeland.
Ah, vive le maître. Merci.
I'd like to talk now about the messaging found in your painting. It's been said that your goal in painting a portrait is to capture the subject's naturalness rather than any particular ideology. However, one critic notes that your painting, Marie Antoinette and her children, is reminiscent of the Christian iconographic tradition of the Holy Family. Where do you stand?
Well, I would say that I first painted with naturalness and spontaneity in mind. I preferred greatly to paint her without full toilette. The caliber of people I had the pleasure of painting and the political climate made it such that communicating certain facts became necessary. The portrait you mentioned was in response to certain wicked people who were outraged at my prior painting of the Queen in a white muslin dress, which they likened to her undergarments.
It was necessary to protect her reputation then.
Ah, bien sûr. Nevertheless, this portrait had a great success.
And what about in your self-portraits? I'm thinking in particular of the one you submitted to the Uffizi in 1790, in which you are depicted as painting the Queen. It is undoubtedly an expression of your royalist views.
Oui. I had been away from France less than a year then. I wanted to portray my optimism for royalist success.
And if I may ask about your royalist views, You named your daughter Julie after a character in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's work, and you painted nearly 100 pastel landscapes during your career, which seemed to be inspired by Rousseau's lyrical descriptions. Given your love of a revolutionist like Rousseau, was there ever a time when you questioned your own royalist ideals?
I'm so well known for my portraiture, I did not expect anyone knew of my landscapes. It is true that I greatly respected the artistic works of Rousseau. I also took to his ideas of motherhood. However, I disagreed with his political ideologies. I followed the Ancien Regime through and through.
You were great friends with Marie Antoinette.
Her Majesty.
Jim excuse, Her Majesty.
Oh, she was beautiful, inside and out. From the very beginning, she was wonderfully kind to me. I was once taken ill and had to miss a sitting, and she waved it away as if it were nothing. My nerves were frayed and I dropped my brushes. The Queen of France insisted on picking them up. My loyalty could never waver. It never did, even when her enemies became my enemies.
Now let's go back to the night of your escape. You mentioned having fled with meager belongings. What was it that you left behind?
Oh, everything. My paintings, including some unfinished ones. Portraits of Madame du Barry and Mademoiselle Contant, for instance. All my trinkets, all my money, or rather, what was left of it.
But you were profoundly successful. Commissioned by royals, no less. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what happened to your funds?
Well, as you know, I also left behind my husband. He was a great arts dealer and an even greater spendthrift.
He spent it all?
Spent it, gambled it, gave it away to some pretty young girls. Who knows exactly? God rest his soul. After I left, he sold what paintings he could to make ends meet. And when that became impossible, he filed for divorce on the grounds of desertion.
That must have been quite the shock. I would say he kicked you while you were down, but it was 1794 by that point? You were doing quite well for yourself.
Indeed I was. Can you believe I was sending him a portion of my earnings? But, to his credit, he tried for many years to convince the so-called Republic that I wasn't a threat, even after the divorce, which happened not long after the terror. Oh, it must have been difficult for him. He did pass away in 1813, and I was much aggrieved. Despite our legal separation, we had lived together since my return.
Yes, your return. We shall circle back to that. But first, a treat from Russia, which you once called your second home. This is Colonna Castilla.
Merci.
Back to business. 2 years before your divorce, in 1792, the government decreed that anyone not living on French soil no longer held claim to their own property. As a result, many symbols of the Ancien Regime, including paintings, were destroyed. You were added to this list. How did this law, which essentially punished immigrants, affect the ownership of things you left behind, like your home and your art collection?
Well, Monsieur Lebrun had social connections that kept him safe, and thus he was able to keep the house and art collection. He could have kept it all if it weren't for his financial difficulties. As for my commissions, most ceased to be mine once completed. I did make several copies of my work, including replicas of those that remained missing. One such painting was a self-portrait, which was in the possession of the Comte d'Ange-Villers until it was confiscated by the Ministère de l'Intérieur. They also have the painting I submitted for approval of l'Académie, which was never returned.
Well, what if I told you I had tracked down the whereabouts of certain other missing paintings?
Do tell.
Well, the first one is a copy of your portrait of the young Duke of Normandy with his dog Mouflet, painted in 1789. Voila.
Ah, sweet boy. Where is it now?
Unfortunately, the Ministère de l'Intérieur ordered its burning in 1794.
Did that poor boy not suffer enough? At least by then I had made a copy.
Next, I have a painting of the Queen from 1788.
Ah, a trick question. That was part of my private collection until it was bought by His Majesty, Louis XVIII. I believe he hung it at the Château de Saint-Croix.
That's right, though it has since been sent to the Louvre. The final painting I have is the aforementioned portrait of Queen Marie Antoinette with her children.
Ah, yes. The Queen had it stored away after the death of the Dauphin. It caused her too much grief to look at. What became of it?
It was rehung in the halls of the Palais after the Emperor's deposition.
Good riddance.
Speaking of Napoleon, the Academy, of which you became a member in 1783, was abolished a decade later under Napoleon's reign in favor of the idea of art as for the people. How do you feel about this idea and the lengths Napoleon's army went to retrieve foreign artworks?
Difficult question. When I returned to France, one of the first things I did was visit the new collections at the Louvre. It was incredible to see all of those artworks in one place, especially after spending the previous 12 years visiting galleries all over Europe. And now, all those artworks were here in Paris. I was so absorbed by the works that I was locked in the gallery after hours. But there is something about their displacement that saddens me. For instance, those masterpieces by Rubens, which I had so admired in Flanders 2 decades before, had lost some of the beauty they once held in their original Flemish surroundings.
As promised, let's circle back to your return. In 1800, Monsieur Lebrun finally succeeded in having your name removed from the list of émigrés. Why did it take you so long to return to Paris? And how did the actual homecoming compare to your expectations?
Oh, the terror, the sorrow, the joy that gripped my mind in turn. I was returning to a France much changed, and where many of my friends had perished. Julie and I had become estranged. She married and remained with her husband in St. Petersburg, so I returned alone. My anxiety dissipated when I arrived. I was welcomed by my brother, Monsieur Lebrun, and several dear old friends. And a party was thrown in my honor, and as I entered the room, everyone clapped. My emotions could not be hidden then.
Yet you only stayed in Paris for 2 years before traveling again. Which brings us to our penultimate treat. Here we have Portland pudding from England.
Ooh.
Please enjoy. So, you left for London in 1803. Can you talk to us about what prompted you to leave your homeland after spending such a long time away?
Paris was less cheerful and lively. I tried to return to life as normal, but so many things I once cared for were gone, such as the gardens at Marly-le-Roi, where I first met Marie Antoinette, my dear friend. Marie Antoinette herself, and the values of society were vastly altered. I found myself depressed, and so I spent a solitary summer at a cabin in the woods of Meudon. It only temporarily relieved my melancholy, and so I traveled for the first time to London. The Brits loved my dear Marie Antoinette, and thus they received me with open arms. Most of the French in England were forced to leave when the Treaty of Amiens was broken. But the Prince of Wales omitted me from this rule. I stayed there for 3 years. I left after receiving word that my daughter had returned to Paris.
And still you didn't settle. You traveled again to Switzerland and then around France.
Oui. Tensions were high in France, especially those occasions when the Allies came. Those times I feared for my life. And it wasn't until the Bourbon monarch was truly restored in 1815 that I felt at ease in France. In those later years, I felt compelled to travel around France after losing my family in quick succession. First, Monsieur Lebrun, then Julie, then Etienne.
You've remained here in Paris for the past 30 years. Well, that brings us to our final dessert, the macaron. Bon appétit.
Ah, my friandise favorite.
Finally, we've arrived home. I'd like to end with a quote from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the same one with which you prefaced your memoirs. En écrivant mes souvenirs, je me rappellerai le temps passé, qui doublera pour ainsi dire mon existence. By writing my memoirs, I will remember the past, which will, so to speak, double my existence. Elisabeth Biget-Lebrun, you have revisited the treats of your past travels, and now there's nothing left to do but look to the future. Tell us what's next for you.
Oh, well, I keep myself busy with friends and family these days. My dear niece, Madame Truffier-Lefranc, is quite doting, and I am fortunate enough in my old age to continue painting. I suspect I will be painting until the day I die.
I don't doubt it. Merci beaucoup, Elisabeth. And thank you, audience, for joining us on Feuilles Friandistes.
Merci.